We back about 8 months later with
Yeah,
the Olivia Burke, who you guys actually heard in the episode on love, which I believe was February.
yeah,
And ironically, or I don't know why ironically, but we shot love with Tanya in February, but you and I had already recorded Perspective also in
yeah,
February. Because
yeah,
back then I was in my, oh, I'll just do it all in one go and then just publish it as and when because, I thought I had all the time in the world. And
yeah,
actually, that's not the way to do these things. It's better to pace yourself, do a deep dive every month. And we are here at Perspective. So, our wonderful listeners have listened to our preamble in part one of Perspective, which was
yeah.
our original video recorded back in February. And we thought, actually, what better way to deep dive Perspective than doing a
Mhm.
little revisit to it in August? And we've already been chatting about the fact that, you know what, I reckon our VIA character strengths are going to be a little bit different this time around. So, welcome back, Olivia. I love having you on the show because we vibed.
Yeah,
And also, we're going to be doing a bit of a two-in-one. So perspective with elements of fairness, which is
yeah.
actually strength number 18. So 16 and 18 kind of combined for this episode, kind of preempting just in case I don't manage to find someone or have time for September's episode. So I'm going to rinse Olivia for a two-in-one special here. How has life been, Olivia? Give us your perspective on life since the last episode.
Oh my gosh, life since the last episode. I honestly think that life really went downhill since the last episode. So maybe I just need more Afsar in my life. Like maybe that's what it is. We just need these monthly catch ups that we call podcasts to keep me balanced. But yeah, I've had quite a lot of like family stuff going on, friend stuff going on. I hear that like 29 is like the year I can't. It's Saturn return. I'm bringing back that horoscope talk again. So I think this is where the year where your life's supposed to kind of like turn upside down, and then you re-find yourself and you return to yourself. And so I would
Wait a
definitely
minute.
say,
Are you serious? That's a thing?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's called Saturn return. Yeah.
I have never heard of that because when you said 29 and then you just described that, I was like, whoa, hold on a minute.
Did
That's
that happen to
really
you as well?
like to the next level. Oh my God, where do I even begin?
Really? Yes.
28, I thought, like, this is it. Life is set. Cool, cool, cool.
Yeah, yeah,
This is it. It's pretty much going to be consistent and
yeah.
constant throughout. 29, life just went and said, ha, psych, you thought. And then 30 was where it really went like nice little.
Okay,
My
this is
friend,
promising. I'm 30
oh,
in 2 months, so this is really promising. It's
Oh my
promising.
God, 30s is where it's at. My friend, Aisha, right, from the reading
Uh-huh.
club, she
Yeah.
literally said, she's not even, she's younger than both of us, actually. But apparently, experientially from her friend, she goes, I've heard that 30 is where it's at. Like, that
Yeah.
is where life gets better. And can't lie to you, 3 years into my 30s, she ain't wrong.
Really? I do hear that. Do you know what? Like, contrary to most people, like, I'm not scared to be 30. Like, I'm actually really excited. Like, I feel like I have good examples of people that are living their life, like living their best life in their 30s. And so I don't find it daunting. And I feel like the hell and back that I've been through in my 20s, like, it's got to be better than this, surely. The only way is up, you know?
I think it's about, ironically, not to be that cringe guy, but it is about perspective, like how
It is
you
about
see
perspective.
and what you've learned. So yeah, you were saying, sorry to hear that you've had a rough time over the
Yeah,
year, but
thank you.
go on. Tell us a little bit about your perspective and how that's changed then in light of obviously you've re-listened to the episode
Yeah,
very recently. So what's changed and what hasn't changed?
I think that this year it's something, and it's funny because I can find myself to be someone that can be quite like rigid. And I think in the last episode, one thing I was talking about was like I'm I can have as much as I have the ability to see things from many different perspectives. I can have very inflexible thinking sometimes, and I can be quite rigid in what I believe to be right or the right way or the correct way of thinking. And I think that like this year I have really been my one of my goals was to embrace duality, embrace the idea that two things can be true at the same time. And I just kind of set it out as like, ooh, cheeky challenge for the year. But then life really said, oh, you want to test it out? Like, oh, you want to see that two things can be true at the same time? And it really did that. So for example, like I got a promotion on a Monday in 1 week, and at the end of that week my aunt passed away, and it was honestly like, oh, I thought I was having a great month. And now this is the worst thing that's happened to me probably in my life. And it was kind of like, but does this now mean that this is the worst year of my life? Does this mean that this is the worst week? Does this mean that this is the worst month, when actually, ironically, June was like the happiest month I'd had, but it ended in the saddest way. But I really had to challenge myself and think, am I now going to decide that June was the worst month of the year, even though the first 28 days were genuinely full of joy, but the 29th day was the worst day? Like, it was really, and so that's just one example of where, like, I've really been tested this year of having things that are really worth celebrating, or really great achievements, and just like really being able to enjoy myself, and the height of really happy moments that are also like cushioned by like sad moments. And I read a quote the other day, and it was like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, do you live a life full of joy with moments of sadness, or a life full of sadness with moments of joy? And I was like, oh, that's deep. And I think that I would say, looking at this year, it's been a mixture, but again, my ability to see things from different perspective has allowed me to be like, it's just a mixture of both. I don't think it's one or the other, it's both. So yeah, life has really been testing and trying and confronting, but it has also allowed me to embrace this idea, of duality, and like two things can be true at the same time.
And that in itself is duality. Like, you've just had all the experiences of life in a very short space of time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how much does like fairness play a part in that then? Because to yeah, there is a real conversation here about balance,
Yeah.
about loss and gain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe there's some themes there of fairness. My
Yeah.
18th. What number was it for you? 10th, right?
10. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that plays a part.
So I think that, like, fairness is a really interesting kind of concept, because you can look at fairness in a variety of different ways. And I think if I think about my experiences that I've had this year, there's a lot of things where I could say, like, my aunt's passing wasn't fair, but who decides what is fair or not? How do we measure fairness? What if I think that's unfair, what would be the fair alternative in that solution? So that's one thing that I've grappled, like, it's not fair. When a loved one passes away, you feel like it's not fair, or you want longer time with them. But if I'm someone who considers myself to be a Christian and God-fearing, who am I to say what is fair if the Lord has decided that it was her time to go? So I think you can even look at fairness as a religious person, I think can be, again, a difficult thing to grapple, because you might pray for something really hard, and then you think that you deserve that thing. So it could be a new job opportunity, or might be someone trying for a baby, or wishing for a partner, whatever it is. And you are praying for something, and you think you've put in all the work and you deserve it, and you think, I should get this thing. And when someone else gets the thing before you, or instead of you, or whatever it might be, we do have this question of fairness. But I think how we understand fairness, or how we kind of like get to grips with what is fair or not, is also heavily influenced by a belief system, which can sometimes make me feel like a hypocrite, because I'm like, okay, how can I believe in God but then say it's not fair that she's, like, passed away? But then I return to, well, two things can be true at the same time. So I can feel like it's incredibly unfair that my cousins have lost their mother, my mum's lost her sister, that I've lost my aunt. But then I can also understand that she wasn't very well. God felt like, she shouldn't be going through any suffering anymore, and she's gone to a better place. And actually, that is fair. It's unfair for me to want her to still be here knowing she was suffering when she could be free of suffering. It feels unfair. It was fair on her. It was unfair on me. So yeah, I think fairness. I mean, that was a very different direction that I went with fairness. But I think just in terms of what I've experienced, I've had to really question what makes something fair or not.
I think it's a really good deep dive almost on how strengths can work in tandem. Like that conversation about fairness was deeply rooted in perspective. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, your perspective is shaped by belief systems and so on. And
Hmm.
perhaps even if you're not religious, let's say you're a total atheist, like what is the alternative fair thing for a person dying when that is a fact of
Yeah,
life?
yeah,
That
exactly.
it's one of the only facts that everyone on this planet, regardless of what background you come from, we all agree on that
Yeah,
life will
yeah,
end at some point.
yeah,
So, where do you want to go with fairness? How do you define that? Who decides that, etc.,
yeah.
etc.? And a lot of that is back down to perspective. How do you envision yourself maybe over the next 4 months using fairness or perspective to navigate? It's a new term. You said you got a new job.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a bereavement.
Hmm. I think continuing with understanding that there can be many truths. Um, that just being a sociology nerd for a second, I thought postmodernism, death of the meta narratives, there's no one single truth, no absolute truth. Um, and yeah, I think just yeah, accepting those perspectives, accepting that even when sometimes things don't feel fair, they're like that's life. And that is so like the phrase that's just life is so sucky. It's so like, all right, shut up. Like okay, that's life. I'm still upset or whatever. But like genuinely that is life. And I feel like I have to this year has taught me to just embrace the good as much as I embrace the bad, even when I don't want to, even when it doesn't feel fair. And so I feel like I just want to continue um on that kind of trajectory of just accepting the good, the bad, and the ugly, whether
Mm.
I think it's fair or not.
We spoke a little bit about in our last episode postcode lottery perspectives, and
Mm-hmm.
I think fairness, what the vibe that we're giving here is, it is what it is. Just suck it up and accept it.
Mm-hmm.
How acceptable is it for us to use such an attitude towards people who really have had it unfair? And some examples we used in the last episode were people of color,
Mm-hmm.
people in Palestine, for example,
Mm-hmm.
people who are oppressed around women. Let's use that as example. Let's use migrants in the UK. Like this summer has been a mad one.
Yeah, it has. It really
Can we
has.
just pause for a minute and be like, what?
Yeah. Because it's really giving like Black Mirror episode. It's giving like I don't understand. Return to the 90s and early 2000s. Like I don't understand. Um,
But not even like yes that,
yeah.
but also like I'm literally sat here recording a podcast with you like nothing happened.
I
Can we
know. I
can
know.
we just
No, I
deep
know.
this for a second? The fact that the society has just what are you what are we doing? Are we ignoring it? Are we brushing it under the carpet? Are we addressing it in micro pockets somewhere, in Parliament, etc.? Like, why is there literally just a dot 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 about this right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's really strange? When the Islamophobic and race riots, like let's call it what it is, when they took place, I was actually abroad. And
Same.
so I was actually in disbelief, yeah, because I was in America and then I was in Jamaica and then I was like, so is this actually real? Like where like obviously I knew it was real, but it was almost as if I was also watching it from a TV screen as if it was a movie or Black Mirror or
Proper like
something.
hyper reality,
Honestly.
simulacra, Baudrillard, all of
Yes,
that jazz,
all
right?
of that.
My Airbnb host would be like, "Oh gosh, yeah, everything's okay," and I'm literally I'm not being flippant about it, I would say,
Yeah,
because I still have family and stuff. I was in
yeah,
Cairo at the time, but
yeah,
I wouldn't say flippant, but I was certainly like, shrug shoulderish, kind of, don't
yeah.
worry, the UK will just get over it in a couple of days' time. And
That's
I,
literally what happened.
I think I didn't actually say those words, but maybe deep down I felt that.
Mm,
And lo and behold,
that's literally what happened. And that's the thing, like when I came back and I was thinking, I was like, this actually happened, right?
can we
like
just
this
talk about the fact that are we gaslighting ourselves a little bit
yeah,
here?
I know,
Genuinely, I
honestly.
was chatting to my friend about I was chatting to Aisha about it
Mm-hmm.
yesterday, and we were saying like it genuinely feels like did it even happen?
I know,
Did I make it up in my head?
yeah, that's what it feels like. Because it's like there's no like, and I watched that. I can't remember if it was some the BBC. I can't remember, but it was a documentary. It was like a mini documentary on like those 3-4 days. And when I was watching it, I was like, this is hell. I was like, I can't believe this is real. Like, I was like, wait, what? Like, and they were speaking to victims of like people who like just lived on the street and were black or brown or Muslim. And like, there was a black woman, and she was saying that like they threw a brick through her window and the children were in the front room. And I'm like, how? Like, what? Like, how is,
I
how,
saw
what?
I, I saw videos of a guy chasing a Muslim couple with a chainsaw.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I saw at a petrol station. I
yeah,
saw videos of the mob. Literally, it was I can't describe it as anything other than a lynch mob. They were
yeah,
standing outside the Holiday Inn or Travel Lodge, whatever it
yeah,
was, the
yeah.
place that was housing migrants. And I was just like, imagine being in that place at that
I
time.
know,
You are fearful.
I
You
know.
you are probably frozen in shock. But
Yeah.
are we just not gonna talk a little bit more about, like, I don't know about you, but 2011 London riots. It
Hmm.
became like this just, that term. I've just said it now, and I guarantee you the listeners are going down memory lane and they're thinking about where was I at that time. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
For example, if you were to say 9/11, right? It
Yeah.
takes you back to a certain time.
That moment. Yeah.
What do we even like? Was this summer big enough? I'm really gaslighting myself here. Was
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
big enough to be given a title or made into a sociological study? I mean,
I
I know the
think,
blatant answer is yes,
yeah,
but
it
why are we
is.
not acting like that?
Yeah, it is. But people will try and make it not that way. And for an example of this kind of like attempt of erasure is like the Euros this year. Like they did well. You know, as I'd say to everyone, the football's never going to come home until England deal with their race problem. And I'm so glad the football did not come home, because look at you lot's neighbours and co-workers and everyone. This is who we're among, right? And what was really funny was that this year, I think it was Rio Ferdinand put up an Instagram post and he was like, yeah, where are the racists now? This is when I think we got into the semi-finals. And there was so many people in the comments like, yeah, but it's not about race, and can we just celebrate football? Why are we making it about race, and why are we taking it back
Because
there? And I
literally
thought,
4 years ago, when we
you
were in the finals and we
right,
lost the finals,
right,
let's just
right.
revisit Twitter then.
Do you know what I
Let's just
mean? You
revisit the
you
images about
people,
Mo Saka and so like,
the same people that was doing monkey emoji in the comments are saying, why are you making it about race now? So
do you know
so
what I
that
mean?
same behavior of you want to pick and choose and you want to erase real things that are happening because you don't want to deal with the realness of the racism, the Islamophobia, and just the disgusting treatment of migrants or anyone who basically isn't white British. You want to erase that when it suits you, but when we want to talk about it, our real lived experiences, it's you're making it about race. But when you are literally chasing people down the street saying, are you a Muslim? Are you black? Are you Asian? That who was making about race then? Like, talk about it. Talk about it.
And
So
not
I do
us,
think
not
it's
us
big
being
enough, but I think there will be an attempt to erase what happened.
100%. Not us being the guys that always bring it back down to race, because
Right.
we did this in perspective in the last episode, and here
One
we
thing
are
about
again.
me, I'm gonna make it about race. Like, yeah.
Unapologetically, period.
Unapologetically, yeah.
Well, this is because it's so relevant. We're talking about perspective. We're talking about fairness
Mhm.
as character strengths, and sometimes those strengths are very hard to apply when you're up against systemic issues.
Yeah.
So this is where I like to have these discussions about, these critical analysis about things like character strengths, and are they really a macro level intervention, or are they very much a micro level intervention?
I think micro. I think, yeah, an individual, I mean, there'll be individuals that will do something like this and do nothing with it. They'll read it once and it will go nowhere. And so, even on a micro level, you could argue, is it even impactful? It depends. It does literally depend on the individual as to
Mm,
whether they will make something of it. I think that we we are so everyone is literally coming from such different perspectives, even on a macro level, that it can't be effective for the masses. We can't have a approach one single approach to this, because everyone is coming from different perspectives, and as we spoke about in the last episode, everyone thinks they're right. and everyone thinks that they are on the right side of history, and they are the ones that make sense, and that the opposing side doesn't make sense, or the contrasting view is, you know, offensive or discriminatory. Where everyone, no one is on the wrong side and knows that they're wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone who's on the side that they are think that they are on the right side, otherwise they'd be on the other side. There are people that we can look at and say they are wrong and strong, but they think they are right and strong. And so this is then the issue, that we're all singing from different hymn sheets. And whilst there is beauty in having like diversity of thought and opinion and perspectives, not when we can't all agree on fairness, justice, humanity, like treating people with kindness. We can't even agree on that. So then the intricate details, we definitely won't be able to agree on.
Okay, then let's take him. I want to hear your perspective on something that's been plaguing me for a little bit of time,
Go for
and
it.
that is, I hear what you're saying about the beauty of diversity of thought. Okay, we'll use the example of Israel Palestine. We'll use the example of almost any kind of conflict and
Yeah,
political beliefs, etc., and social media, as we've often discussed before. When you have your social media, let's use Instagram for example, and you tend to follow people whose opinions align with yours,
yeah,
and it becomes like a bit of an echo chamber, right?
yeah.
Such that when you see something that directly like contrasts that, you see red, the keyboard warriors come out,
Yeah,
from people, or you just be like, whatever, man, that's not my circus, not my monkeys, get them out of here, they're not
yeah,
part of my circle anyway.
yeah, yeah,
So you get rid of them. What happens when, so I've had a couple of people on my Instagram, etc., who are, and let's be real, Instagram is not just like the 10 or 15 people that you know closely. There are
yeah, yeah,
contacts of contacts. They're people that you met 10 years ago that you never seen again, etc.,
yeah,
and you just kind of prey on each other's lives.
yeah,
And they are posting certain things that really do not align with my political values and so on and so forth. Now, with my brother, I was like, you know what? Part of me just wants to block and delete and move, man. I already know the level of debate, if that this person could get themselves into. I just can't be asked, to be honest.
yeah,
And we spoke about this in our last episode because we were talking about allyship, and you were saying, not everyone has to, not every black person has a responsibility to educate everyone
yeah,
about black
yeah,
hair or responsibility. It is actually up to the person who's interested to go to find out more using ranges of sort of sources, etc., etc. Now, I'm always fighting and fitting between that. I should engage in conversation with people that I, don't necessarily agree with, thinking I'm some kind of LBC reporter or something, but I don't have those skills in the slightest. Versus, nah, just block and delete. You don't owe them your energy and so on. I almost just want to keep those people in that virtual circle because it
yeah,
allows my thoughts to be challenged and robusted. The whole, is sociology scientific? Well, you just
yeah,
got to keep
yeah,
trying to prove yourself wrong in order
yeah.
for it to be robust. What do I do? Because it's frustrating seeing it. I see red, I get angry, but I also think expose yourself outside. You need to know that the world is
Yeah.
like this.
I think I'm leaning towards the latter, in you need to know the world is like this, but only when you have the capacity to do so. And I think it's also about, one, your proximity to whatever the situation is, and also just in terms of like, not even just your proximity, like, oh, they're talking about Islam and I'm a Muslim, or I'm like, oh, they're talking about black people and I'm a black person. But like, just in terms of how your proximity, even like emotionally and mentally, to that situation. And because I think that sometimes one reason why I find that I read the comments in anything is like, I noticed that, yeah, I am in an echo chamber. And like, thankfully I am, because I don't really want to hear what other people have to say. However, I have to, so that I am reminded this is the realities of the world. Because like, you know, otherwise, and it's kind of a sad reality, but otherwise you will live in a false sense of security, that
Mm,
everyone is thinking the same way as you, and the same, that feels safe, because how you feel is the right way, is the progressive way, is the humane way, and whatever it is that we're describing. So anything opposing to that is going to feel like a threat. So it would be more comfortable to stick with the opinions and the perspectives and everything that align best with yours, because that feels safe. However, the reality of the situation is that not everyone thinks like you. And actually, scarily, even those that you feel align with you on other things, or people that you would consider progressive or whatever, don't. And so that even kind of creates a question, especially for me. Sometimes I think, like, am I progressive? Like, am I progressive? Or do I just have a different opinion that people have labeled as the progressive one? But I'm like, what makes them non-progressive? Or do you know what I mean? What makes them old-fashioned? Like, why are they not traditional? Why am I saying, oh, they're old-fashioned views? They're not progressive. No, their views are based in tradition, which on a different topic I would admire. But because it's on something, do you know what I mean? So I feel like it is important to recognize, and it's easy to be like, oh, but I do know other people have opposing opinions. Yeah, but you've painted a face of who that looks like that has those
Mm,
opinions, and then you think it's fine because I just avoid people that look like this. As much as we wouldn't want to admit that we judge people in that way, I can definitely hold my hands up and say I do. It would be easy for me to think that people that are anti-immigration, for example, have a certain look, live in a certain location, hold certain views. Yeah, it would be easy for me to do that. But when you look at the people that were in the riots, when you see the tweets of the regular people or the Instagram reels, or you hear the voices of the callers on LBC or whatever it is, you realize, no, these are everyday people. And if I keep myself in an echo chamber and I only see the opinions that reflect mine, I'm going to be caught off guard when I'm at the bus stop and someone moves away from me and I think, they're being a bit funny. What's wrong with that? I know I don't
yeah.
smell. And then I can see on their phone they're saying there's a black woman next to me and I'm nervous because it's late at night. Then I'm thinking, hold on a minute.
Oh my
They
God, please
look
tell me
no-
that.
they
Why
look
does
normal.
this
But they're
story
wearing
sound
an
so
NHS
like
uniform.
real? Please tell me that you haven't.
I haven't experienced that, no.
Okay.
Um, but like you could then be put in a false sense of security because I thought that
Yeah.
people that spoke like that or that had those attitudes were so far from my reality, but actually they're not. They are your neighbors, they're your colleagues, they're like, you know, they're amongst us. And if
Yeah.
we stay in this echo chamber, we will be consistently like caught off guard. And
And it
that is
does.
almost worse.
Oh my gosh, it absolutely. I think I've told you about this before. That one time I was on the pro-Palestine march. It was the very first one after October the 7th, and then this
Mm-hmm.
Zionist guy, or at least Zionist supporter, you could say, like really started arguing with me about it
Yeah.
on a tube full of pro-Palestinian supporters. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed in myself. I mean, give yourself some grace, Afsa,
Yeah,
but
please do.
disappointed in myself in that because I was so caught off guard, my arguments were not arguing. They
Mm.
weren't coherent.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
weren't logical. It they was to an extent, and then the emotions took the better of me.
Right.
Was if I was more prepared that actually these people, and I also have to give credit to him because can I just say that's quite a brave thing to do. You are
Very brave.
literally in central London on a tube. I mean, to be fair, he was very tall, white male. Like he literally had all of the all of the
All of the
privilege
privilege, tick, tick, tick.
tick
Yeah,
tick tick literally amongst, but in terms of numbers he was definitely
yeah,
outnumbered. The thing is no one else wanted to, it was the very first one after October the 7th, no one else wanted to get involved until a little bit later on, but
yeah,
kudos to him for standing up to his values.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
wrong, but
yeah,
standing up
yeah,
to
exactly.
whatever values he had and doing it with such conviction. And to be fair, he then did start becoming quite weak in his own argument as well, but the point
Right.
is that if you don't expose yourself, you will be caught off guard, and that
Yeah,
is sometimes worse. I really don't
yeah,
like when that happens because then I don't
yeah,
look like I kind of know what I'm talking about, and it just looks like I'm following trends for the sake of
yeah,
following them. When
yeah,
actually, no, I'm so passionate about XYZ trends.
yeah,
There we go, Freudian slip, not trends. I'm so passionate about XYZ causes or movements, but I take for granted that everyone surely should just be on this bandwagon too,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And that's not always the case.
It's not always the case. Oh dear. When we were talking about migrants and what they certainly look like. It actually made me think about in Cairo, I was doing some volunteer work with
Mhm.
Palestinian families, and I got certain not vibes, whiffs, is that the right word? Whatever it is, inclinations from some of the volunteers. The volunteers are either Egyptian locals or they are Palestinians themselves who have also
Right,
come to the
okay.
country. And but like that there is a certain animosity amongst some groups
Yeah,
about the foreigners coming in.
yeah, yeah,
taking our jobs, raising rent prices, etc., etc. And it's like, wow, really, really is same shit, different place, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And it is mad that that is like I know this is quite like hippie, yeah. But sometimes I want to just be like, guys, can we all just like step out of our realities for a second and just look at like this is another human that's helping. Like, does it have like can we like do you really like yeah, I don't know. I think I think it is crazy that that story, that narrative has been planted around the world that yeah, everyone is fearing the immigrant while simultaneously also being an immigrant somewhere else. Like, I find it just absolutely hilarious that is it Tommy Robinson that he was fleeing to, I use the word fleeing really lightly, to Marbella or somewhere in Spain, but he's talking about immigrant, like he's talking about he's worried for his children while simultaneously inciting hatred in his home country, which he's had to flee from for his safety, inciting hatred towards people who have had to flee their country because, like, it's just like, hello, are you like? I just don't. Yeah, it's too much for me sometimes. It's actually too much. The hypocrisy and just the like really simplified thinking, really simplistic thinking that but that's the thinking that gets amplified. And that, again, if we talk about fairness, that is what I think is not fair. It's like, why is that the voice that's getting amplified and not one that's actually speaking sense or that's actually spreading love or kindness or humanity? Like, why is it hatred that is being amplified to this level? And why are the public believing that voice? Like, that's not fair. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fact that people are having to flee their country, that's like, again, if we talk about fairness, like, those things aren't fair.
Let's talk
Um,
about, like you just said, about which voices are being amplified and which aren't. I would say, like, we can't even say the voices that speak sense versus the voices that don't speak sense because that's a matter of perspective. As you said,
yeah,
some people are
yeah,
wrong and strong, and some people are right and strong, and that
yeah.
is there is a difference between that. Who decides what? But I guess that's why, for the reading club, shameless plug to anyone who's not yet joined the reading club, one of the taglines for that or the theme of the books are to amplify the voices that are muted
Yeah,
just to make sure that everyone has a platform at some point. It's not about whether that muted voice is right or wrong,
yeah,
but just
yeah,
like we haven't heard from you in a while,
yeah,
let's give you a platform. While
yeah,
Tommy Robinson's voice, as let's use him as the poster boy for anti-immigrant people, let's say, that's not a muted voice. We hear
yeah,
you loud and proud. We've
yeah,
seen you this summer. We felt you this summer.
yeah,
That's not a muted voice. Thank you for
yeah,
your time in the platform. Settle
literally.
down now.
Yeah,
Let's give some of the other people a bit of a platform.
yeah.
And you're absolutely right with this conversation about fairness. I'm going to just reference something that I see on the VIA website, which I think almost is contradicting.
Mm-hmm.
It says here that fairness is treating people justly, not letting your personal feelings bias your decisions about others. You want to give everyone a fair chance and believe there should be equal opportunity. Fine. It's a cognitive judgment capacity that involves reasoning and making judgments, and it involves two types of reasoning. Now, these two types, I'm not sure
Okay.
whether they are like a seesaw or whether they are able to exist together.
Okay.
Duality themes. Let's have a look at
Mm-hmm.
it. The first one says justice reasoning, which emphasizes logic and weighing principles to determine moral rights and responsibilities.
Okay.
And by that logic, I'm thinking, okay, so imagine life, cost of living as hard as it is, and it's hard enough for me to get around, and all of a sudden now there's been a big influx of immigrant families coming into the estate at the end of my road, and it's hard to get a doctor's appointment now. It's hard to get my kids into school. That moral frustration because now I'm having to share a very small slice of the cake with even more people.
Mm.
There's something there that doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
Second definition, care reasoning. This includes empathy and compassion, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Now all of a sudden I'm like, I get it. The cake slice is very, very small, but you know
Okay.
what? Let's do the best that we can with this one slice that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I find that that's maybe it's my perspective on it, but the two things don't I don't think that they can coexist. They're almost mutually exclusive. And also, where's the bigger question of, hold on a minute, why are we having just this slice? Can we all gang up and try and get a bigger slice for ourselves? Because what
Yeah,
the hell?
yeah. I
No one's
think
having those combos.
I'm torn. I'm really torn because sometimes I think, and I'll try and think of an example if I can, but I think that we've kind of been led to believe that if we are making a decision or judgment based on logic, that it can't ever include any emotion in terms of like empathy or kindness or any of the other things that was in the second one. And so I think initially we think, well, no, those two reasonings can't coincide because we can't be both logical and emotional at the same time. But I think that we can because the example that you gave was a really good one. And then I posed the question, oh, okay, so this person A is upset because there's been families of immigrants have come and are now using up or not using up, also using the resources readily available to people that live in this area, and that they feel like that's rubbed them up the wrong way. But let's say, for example, I don't know, the government put something in our water, and suddenly in this area, that this is just go walk with me here. Suddenly in this area, the 70% of women who fall pregnant in that area are pregnant with triplets. And now there's an increase of people using the same resources. But are we now angry at pregnant women? We're not.
No.
You're angry at immigrants because you hate immigrants. You're not angry at immigrants because they're using up the resources. Because if all of a sudden have it, like I know there's certain nations in the world where twins is just more common. I know in Nigeria, there's a Yoruba tribe in an area where it's like the largest amount of twins in the world. But like, if that was just a case where in Britain, let's say, I don't know, in Islington, there was just an increase of women having twins, nobody would say, right, we hate pregnant women. Yeah, they're just stealing all the pediatric appointments. There's still children aged between 0 and 18 who need those pediatric appointments. That's not fair. You wouldn't suddenly hate pregnant women because that's not the narrative that you've been told, that pregnant women, yeah, or that twins or triplets are evil. But if someone decided, if there was a new Andrew Tate that said, I actually think that twins or triplets, there's an evil gene, and anyone that's a triplet is evil, then suddenly we would hate triplets. But that's not because it's the truth, that's because that's the narrative that has been fed. So I feel like
Mm.
we can have both compassion or empathy with logic if it fits the narrative that you've been told or the narrative that you want to believe. Because to me, I think I have both a logical and empathetic view towards immigration. And I think that it's like we understand that we have colonized majority of the world, and therefore there are infrastructures and systems in countries who we have colonized who don't run as well as Great Britain because of our history. So it is the least, the least we can do as a privileged first world or more economically developed country, nation, um, as part of the Western world, to open up our borders to whoever needs refuge. Because I would argue not even because of what we've done, just because, really, just out of humanity. And while people can be like, oh, I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, not everyone at the anti-immigration protests are racist or Islamophobic. I'm like, I don't know though. I'm like, I think you are. Even if you think you're not, my perspective is that you are. Because you're yeah, I just think it yeah, I'm rambling.
Are we saying that anti-immigration and xenophobia are one and the same?
That's how it feels. I would like to hear a view where someone explains to me why they are anti-immigration that I don't find problematic. And that's genuine. Like I would be interested to hear. I I probably would have an immediate like, you're chatting shit. Like I would be like,
No
but
room
again,
for
this is
duality
about,
there.
yeah, this is about like broadening my perspectives. Like maybe they do have a point, but maybe I'm never going to want to see that point or that perspective because I just feel like, again, that is on the wrong side of history and that is just not something I ever want to even try and understand. But I need to be aware that it exists.
It's this is where I start doubting and debating my own ego about it. It's like, Asa, do you even want to understand sometimes? And the
Yeah.
honest to God truth is no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
And going back to the question about anti-immigration, is it the same as xenophobia? I would argue yes,
Yeah.
because even in immigration, there is privilege. There is money that speaks and gives you different levels of migration.
Yeah.
There is the fact that white migrants are called expats in other
Right.
countries,
Talk
but
about it.
we've attached the word immigration with such negative dirtiness
Yeah.
that the two things do not mean the same thing.
Yeah.
If you are
100%.
an immigrant and you are an expat, they do not mean the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Although technically,
They do.
physically, financially, that
Yeah.
is the exact same thing. The
Yeah.
reasons might be different, but it is the same thing.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
migrant is one person who moves from a place to another place.
Yeah.
Details argue amongst yourselves,
Yeah.
bring in the nuances and stuff, but that is it. And the
Yeah.
fact that they are not treated the same tells me everything I need to know that it is a race and a xenophobic issue. And that's
100%.
not okay. Even like
100%.
even the Palestinian refugees that we were working with, it was story time here. We were doing some donation packing on one of the days, sorry, buying, etc., etc. Long story short, we weren't allowed to because I was going for such a short period of time. The company or the group that etc. that I had associated myself with had said, you know what, we're not going to give you any mental health trauma or casework because 3 weeks you're going to bugger off and
Oh,
leave. It's not fair on them. It was like
yeah.
totally fine,
Yeah.
absolutely get that. So
Sorry,
instead
I
we
thought
did.
you was gonna say they weren't gonna give you any like mental health support, and that's why I made that face. And then you
No,
finished your sentence.
no, no. We're not because that was my role to go and provide that support. So,
Mm,
training, etc., all of that would have been done, but no, it's just that doesn't seem right. So instead, we thought, okay, what if we were to help support and train the trainers or
right.
train the volunteers? So not directly working with the Palestinians, but indirectly.
Yeah.
Fine, that was the kind of thread throughout. But when we got there, you were able to make connections, you were able to make contacts, and we got given like a list of 12 families who needed some bare necessities, and we were told. So a lot of this now comes down to what you're told with mutual contacts, people who are perhaps Egyptian locals, privileged people like you and I,
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
giving up their time and so on. And we were given a list of 12 families with some, details about names, ages of the people in the family, and gender. That's it. Literally a list on your notes app on your phone that says, Olivia, 30, XL, for example, whatever size that you might
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
etc. And then we would go and buy the bare minimum:
Right.
towels, PJs, underwear, shoes and socks. That was literally it because some of these families we were told have come from the Rafah border 7 months ago, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, and they're still wearing the clothes that they have on their back since then. Right, your reaction says it all.
Yeah.
That's what we're processing. So we go with the volunteers, we're buying stuff, we're packing it another day. It's great fun. Here we are with all our privilege, and doing our poverty porn out here,
Right.
discussing, do we take photos, do we not? Some of the donors want to see, some of the people, and I get like why some people want the photos because
Yeah.
you want to see where it's going,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
money. People are distrusting of charities, but they're more trusting of individual people that
Yeah.
etc., etc. I don't like it because I'm a bit like my integrity says this, and I'm leaving it with God. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
got he's
Yeah.
got all the pictures. I don't
Yeah.
need to prove
Literally.
it. He's got all the pictures. I might take a one or two if they agree to it, and it will be
Yeah.
on my gallery for me to flick back on one day in the future and be like, oh, do
Yeah.
you remember so and so?
Yeah.
That's it. So you go through all of that politics. First day we went to deliver them, and we were in for a bit of a shock. I can't lie
Mm,
because we thought, I think the image that you go in with, and I find this very strange as well. I did not tell anyone that I'm going to volunteer with children. Children weren't even anywhere on that list.
yeah.
Nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked for on my socials, does anyone have any exercise books, pens, stationary projectors? And my reasoning behind that was for when I do my volunteer workshops.
Right.
Right? These are adult learners, if you
Yeah.
like. The people had put two and two together and made five and decided that I was now volunteering with children and giving my time up for children. And I'm like, I never actually once
You
said
never
that.
said that. Yeah.
Again, it goes to show like the biases that people live with. So already I'm feeling like an imposter syndrome. Like, okay, how
Mm.
many times do I have to remind people I'm literally not going to be seeing many Palestinians?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the fact that I'm
yeah.
seeing these 12 families are a bit, a total fluke and a bit of a privilege as well. Fine. Get there. First day, 5 families. And we're shocked because these houses that they're living in look quite decent.
Right.
I would go so far as to say they are bigger than the current house that I'm living in right now.
Hmm.
And me and my colleague come back home and we're like, what was that?
Yeah,
Like, what did we actually just, what?
yeah.
And we don't have the words to kind of process what the hell we've seen. And there's a clear language barrier. We didn't have a translator with us that day.
Right. Okay.
Really big language barrier. So we're just kind of dropping off donations, doing whatever we can through to like gestures and single words here and there, dropping and leaving, if you like. No
Yeah.
pictures taken, but there certainly was a sense of, were we lied to? Were we scammed? I can't
Mm.
say anything about the Palestinians themselves
Yeah, yeah.
because like I don't know their stories. I don't even have the language. So let me not say anything about them. But
Right.
that middle person who got us to like buy all these things with the donors' money and then deliver them, what? There's something not quite right here. So we were feeling a certain perspective, right? And we were
Yeah.
like, fast forward to the next day. This time we do have a translator with us, and the sheer difference in the 5 houses are exactly how we predicted.
Right.
It was in shabby, rundown areas, low
Mm.
economically developed areas. The houses were decent-ish or not decent at all,
Right.
unfurnished, and it was a little bit more like we had imagined it
Yeah.
to be. And we started hearing the stories because we had the translator as well with us. We spent time with them, and it was just God's way of saying duality.
Yeah.
Every single you need
Yeah.
to stop saying the word Palestinians or treating that as a monolith.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
to see people from every social class background.
Oh,
You got
yeah.
to see people, and you know what? Categorically, they all said, "We don't mind you taking photos. Please don't upload them on social media."
Yeah.
We think that might be to do with dignity because a
Yeah.
lot of them had come from social class, like high social class backgrounds. We went to a couple, I'm going to say their names because it's important to honor them. Dina, and her husband are project managers, and I think he works in the embassy or some kind of government job, civil service,
Hmm.
and she was an engineer. She was showing us pictures of her house.
Wow.
Her 9-year-old boy was like, "Yeah, I ring home every day to make sure my bike is okay." These are real freaking human
Yeah.
beings,
Yeah.
like, and what
Yeah.
they've come from to
Yeah.
where they're at now. Of course, there's an element of, yeah, this hurts my ego a little bit.
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
This hurts my
Wow.
ego. And God really said, you know what, you lot thought you
Yeah.
jumped to a conclusion after day
Yeah.
one. Let me show you day two.
Wow.
And then it was like, okay, it was God's way of saying, stop. You've walked in with your colonized mindset, with your
Yeah.
poverty porn, thinking that you're going to be this white savior, and you really thought, you know what, you've done your bit by not taking pictures, and you're going to keep your voice, your ego kept, etc. But your thoughts, though, you let them run. You
Yeah.
let them run after day one, and there is plethora of truths that are all valid. Every single one of these people had a different educational background. Every single one of them had a different like social class background, familial background. There was divorcees. There was totally like a mother of three who was madly in love with her husband still. It was so cute. She was like,
That's so
I can't
cute.
lie to you. I'm actually one of the reasons why I pushed to run from Gaza is because of him, not even the kids.
Wow.
Because if the
Wow.
kids, if anything happens to them, I know they're with God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what they do is the Israeli forces they kidnap the men and they torture them, and we may or may not ever see them again. And I couldn't bear if anything like that happened to him. My heart is with him. Like
Bless
she was
her.
referring to her husband, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no man, what a love story. Like
Yeah.
you got another like elderly woman who is crying for her son who's left in Gaza, and when I say crying for her son, we're not talking 10-year-old. He's a 40-year-old grown man,
Yeah.
but she's still a mother.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
We don't talk about those stories very often, and it's just
Yeah.
it really God really said your perspective is you might think it's out here, but it's
Yeah.
not. Let me teach
Yeah.
you, boy. Let
Yeah.
me teach you.
Wow. That is really interesting. And I feel like even as you were speaking, I feel like the what you said about ego definitely comes in that. And I think ego comes in both the conversation of perspectives and also the conversation of fairness. Because if you think about ego in terms of perspectives, I know we spoke about before in terms of, yeah, like us thinking that we are on the right side of history is even rooted in ego. If tomorrow the world changed and everything that we think, yeah, or that we stand 10 toes down on, it was in the reverse. And that was suddenly, I mean, in terms of even thinking about Palestine, that's not so hard to imagine, because you can say pro-Palestine or from the rivers to the sea and someone will be saying you're anti-Semitic. So that's not so hard to imagine, to be fair. But if you think about everything that we personally feel like is right, is correct, is true, is the kindest thing, is the most humane thing, or whatever, was suddenly put on his head and was seen as discriminatory or in line with bigotry or all things negative, would we still stand 10 toes down? We don't have to answer that question, but it's interesting because suddenly then my ego thinks, well, do would I still out loud say I'm an ally of LGBTQIA plus people if that was seen as, suddenly it was opposite day, yeah, and suddenly that was seen as the worst thing? Would we still stand 10 toes down on these things, or would our ego play a part and suddenly we want to be a little bit more quiet? So as you speak, and I was thinking, yeah, ego does play a part in this. Ego also plays a part in fairness. If we think about, like, for a second, you might have felt like, yeah, have we been swindled in this situation? And you might think that actually, you you might go somewhere and you might think, gosh, these people are living a bit better than us. Like, even you said, you was like, this house is a bit better than us. So then you might even think, well, is it even fair that I've come over here and spent my money and come to here to help these people that are better off than me? Is that fair? Again, that's ego. Your ego in that moment was like, not
100%.
me. Like,
And let me
you,
let me just share the humbling with that one that I received the next day, because I don't want the listeners to just leave that and be like, well, he just
yeah,
said that they're living in a flat that's better than his own house here in the UK. It was,
yeah,
but they didn't have a choice.
yeah,
These people have come from money because
yeah,
they kind of had to bribe their way through the crossing, if you like, to safety, etc., for example, or they've gone through legit initiatives, whatever is the case.
yeah, yeah,
But they all have categorically said, we can't afford the rent. We
right,
can't afford the rent to stay here, but we also haven't got a choice. So we're here maybe for this month, but we're looking to move out next month.
right.
And the living situation over there, even for like foreigners like me, it's very much
Mhm.
like a lastminute.com. You
Right.
can't plan where you're going to move to 4 months in advance. You rent an apartment, you're going to
Okay.
do it like 2 days before you move, if that. So it's
Wow.
really quick pace, and like in the group chats and stuff, people are always uploading. There's a family about to be evicted. Can anyone help them with rent? Can anyone help them with a smaller place and so on and so
Wow.
forth? So it's not even like, yes, they have a nice place and stuff, but they're not happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All 12 of the families did not ask us for any extra money, any extra
Mm,
donations, none of that. They just wanted
yeah,
to spend time to talk about their families and their home and the fact that they can't wait to go back. And thirdly, they just wanted to have their loved ones with them.
yeah. And
Doesn't
I
matter how
think,
big your house is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember the biggest house I went to. It was, I can't remember what the lady's name was. The biggest house I went to, because I remember that was the house I really felt a bit like, what the actual hell? Can't wait to go
Yeah.
home and debrief about this. But she had a very glazed look over her face, very
Mm,
emotionless, until we found out that she's 23 years old, widowed,
mm,
and a 1 month old baby also died that she left back in Gaza.
yeah,
So you know what? In that perspective, fuck your big house.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Fuck what you
exactly.
think about my curtains and my marble floor. Fuck it.
Yeah, yeah. And also as well, like, again, it's about it, it's relative, because actually, even if, yeah, she's living in this big house, the marble floors and the curtains and floor to ceiling windows, what has happened to her, again, going back on fairness, is still not fair, because the life that she once had versus being married and having a baby and the joy of being a mother and being a wife, and to the life that she has now, is not fair. Even if what it looks like from this perspective, like, if you hadn't heard her story, you might have, you're actually doing all right. But actually, when we look at her starting point, what's happened to her isn't fair. And all those people, even if, and this is the thing, it's like, even when we look at the immigration in this country, even though the anti-immigration racists might be like, oh, well, they've come in here and I've been on the council transfer list for 20 years, but they've come here and get a 5 bedroom house, blah, blah, blah. Like, they think that that's not fair. But they don't realize that these people, first of all, those scenarios are very few and far between, actually, because a lot of people that come over here and are seeking refuge, are seeking asylum, or have migrated over here don't live in 7-bedroom houses. It's often multiple siblings sharing bedrooms, parents sleep in the front room, or do you know what I mean? There is no front room because the bed. So that's not even many people's reality that they now live in a 6-bedroom council flat. Also, I'd find it hard to find a 6-bedroom council flat. Never heard of one, but whatever. um, but regardless of the anti-immigration people looking at them now and saying that's not fair. What's not fair is that there is war in their country and they've had to leave everything they know and love and they're comfortable with and that they thought would be there forever behind
Mm.
and go to a new country and be homeless, yeah, and their children, even the innocent things of their children not having their favorite toy or even their favorite snack that they have when they're anxious, or you know what I mean, the parents being
God.
really educated and having like great jobs back home and then coming here and being spat on or disrespected because they're in a low kind of a low status job. That's not fair. even
What
even if they've been put up in a 5-bedroom council flat, from where they started to now, that's not fair. Not that you think you can't get a job and that they're stealing your jobs, but you've never applied for one. Like, what are
the
you talking
fair
about?
thing to do there, the fair thing to do there is for us as onlookers to start our perspective not on this as day one,
Yeah,
but go back a bit.
100%.
Go back, whether it's 76 years, whether it's
Yeah,
10 years, whether it's
yeah,
5 years, go back a little bit and
yeah,
understand that person's context and that stories. What you're
100%.
seeing today is the big house, but you
Exactly.
didn't see the glazed over look on her face
Yes,
until she
exactly.
spoke.
Yeah,
You didn't see the fact that actually none of this is actually hers or theirs. They're
yeah,
renting it temporarily and it's putting a dent in their pocket, which they could use
yeah,
for other things. What you also didn't see is the fact that the old man is sitting there, chain smoking or whatever. His eyes are glued to the screen about what's happening back home,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's just death and destruction. Not
exactly.
not good trade. Look at the new jobs. It's death and destruction. His
Yeah,
eyes are glued there, and I think it's high time that in order to give at least a little bit of fairness or have fairness in our perspectives, start your story not just here and today. Go back a little bit.
100%.
Oh,
Wow.
heavy shiz. All in
Hmm.
all, though, an important experience I needed to have.
Yeah,
Um, Perhaps an important experience you needed to hear as well. Thank you for your reactions.
yeah,
They were
yeah,
very, very validating. But I think it says a lot about the politics in poverty, the
yeah,
politics that exists everywhere. You can't escape it. I used to be that person who says, I'm not very political. That's a fucking lie
yeah.
because it's literally
Our whole
ingrained.
existence is political. Like,
Everything is political. You can't
yeah,
escape it. And the
yeah,
more you embrace that and become friends with it, you realize politics isn't actually that scary.
yeah, yeah,
Politics is powerful. And ironically, I hold a lot of that power. So
exactly.
take your fairness, take your perspective strengths, dear listeners, and thank you for giving us your time. Do you have any final comments or thoughts, Olivia, that you want to share on perspective or fairness?
I just want to encourage people, I guess, based on our conversation, to embrace the idea that two things can be true at the same time. I even think that in itself links to what we just discussed. Like, we can look at someone's current, but consider their starting point and say, yes, they are fortunate to live in this nice marble house. Actually, compared to their starting point, they their life isn't all fine and dandy. So I think just embracing that two things can be true at the same time, and to consider the many different perspectives, um, and also where we can challenge our ego and remove our ego when we are looking at different perspectives or weighing up whether something is fair or not.
Spot on. I think I want to leave it there because that's very poignant. I think that's very clear. Um, I look forward to doing this survey again at the end of the year to
Same.
see if anything's changed because you said yours might have very much have changed. So
Yeah.
let's maybe touch base on some of the later ones again. I don't feel like this is the last you guys have heard of Olivia because you know
No.
us. We love to make the micro macro, which is one
Right.
of the weaknesses of this survey, but we're doing a pretty good job of it. So
I
let's
think so.
let's stay tuned and find out more in future episodes.